Okay, cool. So, are there any natural remedies for STDs?
We would prescribe in modern medicine. The thing about genital warts is actually if you leave them alone, after some time they will actually disappear.
Can you still get STDs without penetration?
So it can be easy to forget them. And yes, many of us have been in the situation where we've had to pull out one that's been left there for days, and we don't want that happening.
And can you get pregnant without penetration? That's the other question.
Despite the fact that we know of all these sexually transmitted diseases, we're still struggling to control them. And this is not just in the UK, the US, different parts all around the world, we're still struggling. But I do think it's important that there's an awareness of the possibility that it can start a little bit earlier. And even as you get into your 40s, when I would expect that perimenopause might begin.
That real quick, what are some of the causes of fibroids, and why is there kind of an abnormal amount of occurrences, especially with women of color?
The diet that you take, for example, processed foods, bad fats or trans fats, taking alcohol, caffeine, smoking, some of these things have been linked to increased risk of growing fibroids.
Hey y'all, welcome to Transformation to Expansion. My name is Misconceptions Bradley, and welcome to our show. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Dr. Sylvia Kama-Kieghe. Okay, a UK-based consultant in general practice focusing on women's health and sexual health. She has diplomas from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. She founded askawayhealth.org and Ask Away Health with Dr. Sylvia on YouTube to address health inequalities in minority communities, and has educated and impacted over 1 million women in sexual and reproductive health. Please welcome Dr. Sylvia to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's great to be with you today. Cheers.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm really excited for today's episode because we are going to get into the sexual health and the sexual reproductive health of women, especially women of color, because unfortunately there's so much misinformation out there. We're getting advice from so many people who do not have the same experience as us, and let alone the same bodies as us. So it's going to be a great show to really talk about some of those topics with you today.
Absolutely.
But first of all, I really want to know, how did you get into the work? Like, what inspired you to get into the work that you do today?
It's not a very long story, thankfully. I've been practicing as a general practitioner, or family doctor, as it's known in other parts of the world. I think I've been practicing for 3-4 years, and it was a small practice where I was the only female doctor. And when issues came up that had to do with women's health, just as you said, sexual health, reproductive health, of course, women would like to see someone like them, who would understand what they're talking about. And for whatever different reasons, they tended to gravitate towards me. And my colleague who was working in the practice with me was, quite happy. Sylvia, you go ahead and, keep seeing the ladies when they come. And I enjoyed the conversations. I enjoyed the questions. And apart from the fact that I could relate with what was being said, what they were asking and what we were saying in conversations, I felt drawn to wanting to share more and more information. One of the biggest challenges I had was the time that we had to actually inform and help talk to people about their health. You would come in for a 10-minute consultation, which is what we generally have in the United Kingdom in our GP practices or surgeries. And by the time the lady says whatever it is that she has to say, and you have a conversation, ask questions, and so on, you're literally not left with much time to be able to say, did you know that this, that, or the other? So that was, for me, I thought that was a really big issue. And there were so many questions coming up. I think that was where it all started. How can I say this that I'm saying to this lady to others who probably have similar questions? And that was why I decided that I would um, look at questions being asked, encourage women to ask questions that are burning. So that's where Ask Away and Health came into it, and come onto the social media platforms, as many as I could, to be able to share that information. And because I didn't have this wasn't part of the plan when I was going through my training. which is strange because as a practitioner, as a medical practitioner, a lot of the work we do is about sharing information. It's not just about, oh, this is the problem, take this, here's a prescription. It's also about, did you know this about how the ovary works? Or did you know this about, this particular condition or the other? And some people might have come in with a preconceived notion of something and just trying to say, oh, actually, well, this or that is how it should happen, or even encouraging somebody and say, no, don't sit with this, this is not normal. If you have the sense of just accepting heavy periods, no, this is not, it's not. And giving, hopefully inspiring or impacting people, providing confidence or even advocacy to actually push back, even if I'm not their doctor, but if they've heard from what I've said and um, receive tips from what I've said, then they can go on to whoever their practitioner and say, can we look at this way? Can we do this? I hope that that is what um, the work I'm doing ends up with for the people who listen to me. But that was the drive. That was just that thirst to share that information in a way that is relatable for for women out there.
And I love it. Yeah. And, that's how I found you, through your YouTube channel. And I love that, I love the fact that you said, part of your job is already to share information. Why not
Hmm.
do this on YouTube? Why not invite more people to have access to this information? I just think it's so important to realize and to know. And for those of y'all listening, please definitely, of course, the link is in the bio, but you need to check out her YouTube channel because, again, sometimes you can Google something and you're just going to get WebMD and you're not going to get the really accurate information. Or you're going to get, oh, you have this lump, it's cancer. Like, it's not
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
reliable 100% of the time. So it's just really great to have somebody, to have this resource on YouTube, on your website, from somebody who is credible, somebody who knows what they're talking about, and somebody who's accessible too. You respond to the comments that you have, you respond to the questions people ask you on YouTube,
Hmm.
and that's one of the reasons why I invited you on, because you are very connected. You are really passionate about, making sure that our community has access to this information. So let's get
Absolutely.
into that real quick. Let's get into some of the stuff that you talk about on your channel. One of the biggest topics I have come across, not just in my personal life, but also here on the podcast, is fibroids, especially when it comes to women of color. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I have so many friends. And at some point, I don't want to be able to, I don't want to say this anymore, but I have so many friends who have had some experience with fibroids or currently have fibroids or who even had fibroids during pregnancy. So can you just talk about that real quick? What are some of the causes of fibroids? And why is there kind of an abnormal amount of occurrences, especially with women of color?
Yeah, so I think you were, when you were talking about having lots of friends, or perhaps referring to the fact that it happens so much more in people of or women of color. Um, I think that's the $1 million question, because it's something that is like a bugbear that we haven't got the answer to. But let's just sort of backtrack. Fibroids, and there might be people who don't know, even though it is something that there is more awareness about it, I think, and there's more conversation about it, which is good because that means people are questioning more, and hopefully we will be able to get more answers. But fibroids are benign growths um, of the womb, and they develop from one of the three layers of the womb. The womb has three layers. There is the outer layer, um, that sort of covers the womb and just sort of holds it in place. Then there is the middle layer, which is the muscle of the womb. And then there is the inner layer, which is the lining. And that's the bit where menstrual blood sheds, on monthly basis for those who are menstruating. Fibroids grow from the middle, the muscle layer, and they can grow in either direction. They can push into the inner layer, they can push out, or they can just sort of sit in the middle. They can do all sorts of different things. They're benign. And so that means that they're not going to, even though they can sort of push in different directions, they're not going to invade or grow beyond um, the womb itself. So they're not cancer or a malignancy. That's important to make that difference. But somehow these cells start to multiply, start to grow and grow and grow. And they can grow to different sizes, as I'm sure many people are aware. There can be some that are very small. They can grow to different sizes. They can happen just one fibroid in the womb. In other cases, there may be more than one, several fibroids at the same time. there's still so much that we don't know about fibroids. When in terms of what causes them, there is no single one answer. The way that you would say to me, oh, what causes warts, for example, genital warts, and we can sort of focus on a particular virus, HPV, or you can say this causes that. At the moment, we don't know exactly what it is or what are the things that cause it. What we do know is that there are certain situations and conditions associated with developing fibroids. And one of the biggest ones, of course, is hormone imbalance. Many women who talk about fibroids, who have read up about fibroids, hormone imbalance and usually an excess of estrogen and progesterone are associated with fibroids growing. But even if you don't go into studies, if you just ask yourself, there's some people who do experience hormone imbalance, but they haven't got fibroids. So it's not the only answer. There are other things that we sort of think about. For example, we talk about chronic inflammation. For those who go into these studies in detail, trying to look at how does it happen? When do the changes start? Scientists have asked themselves, is it something that happens while a girl is developing just as a baby in the womb, even before birth? Is there something that's happening there? Or is it something that happens after birth and it's as a result of whatever kind of situations or stresses that might happen that we don't know of? There is a link with your genes, and we've observed that you might have fibroids in families. It may be that, oh, somebody's sister's got fibroids and their mom did, and a cousin. There's that link, but it's not there it's not there in other families. You might have one person who's got fibroids, but then other people in the family don't. So I was talking about chronic inflammation. So by that, there could be different conditions that are associated with that. One of them is being overweight. So we have observed that in some obese or overweight women, fibroids seem more likely to happen. But then you will get some women who are overweight and they don't have fibroids. And so there are different things. I mean, we could also talk about the environment and then look at the diet and look at activity, both of which, of course, will impact on being obese. But, the diet that you take, for example, processed foods, bad fats or trans fats, taking alcohol, caffeine, smoking, some of these things have been linked to increased risk of growing fibroids.
Get started on your wellness journey today. Whether you are starting your wellness journey in the middle of it or finishing it, this library will help you jumpstart your wellness. And really, it has so much more than that. It has full guides on how to quantum leap, full guides on how to manifest, and even my personal favorite, coloring books. Yes, and I'm talking unique coloring books. Y'all already know who you're dealing with, okay? We have baobab coloring books, cactus plant coloring books, and so much more. And it's completely free. So please make sure to check it out, especially if you're on your wellness journey, or if you know a friend who is on the wellness journey and wants some free resources, please let them know about the wellness library, okay? The link is in the show notes below. I love y'all so much. Let's get back to the show.
Then you can look at things like what we call endocrine disrupting chemicals. And they've talked a lot more about this in the last sort of decade, and their relevance, not just in fibroids and not just in women's health, really in terms of overall health, because we are recognizing more and more how these chemicals can disrupt the normal development or the normal activity of hormones in our bodies, and they can, they are implicated in doing that for women's health conditions, and that can include fibroids. It can include, other different women's health conditions. So, what causes fibroids? We don't know exactly, but we do know that there are these associations. The question is, why do we have them to such degree in certain groups, certain ethnicities? And of course, they do have a higher occurrence in women of Black origin. So African American, Afro Caribbeans have such a higher rate of developing fibroids. Why is it? What's different in terms of makeup? What's different in terms of background, perhaps in terms of what an individual has been exposed to over time? What kind of stresses could result in this happening? it goes beyond just socioeconomic class, to be honest with you, because if we said, oh, okay, it only happens to those in a particular socioeconomic group, that's not true, because it actually cuts across different I think different classes in terms of how exposed they are, or how much how rich or wealthy they are in order to be able to afford better food or that kind of a thing. And I think one more point I wanted to make was, even though we see that greater occurrence in people of African, Afro-Caribbean, African American backgrounds, in the last decade, there has been it's the occurrence or the incidence of fibroids is increasing in other groups. So there are some studies that talked
Mm.
about Latin America more, and it may be that, well, they're being more reported, so that's one possibility. But the study talked about perhaps as we evolve and as diet becomes less natural and more and tends towards more processed food, people take up more sedentary jobs. They're sort of more in front of their computers and maybe not getting as much activity. Perhaps this is why we're seeing these conditions. So there is a mix of these um, these factors when it comes to developing fibroids. And we could go on and go on and sort of talk about, we can
Hmm.
prognosticate and say suggest that, but these are the things that have their fingers in how fibroids could develop. And like you said, I do talk a lot about fibroids on my channel. I devote a lot of time to trying to explain what it is, and I find it interesting. I think it's useful for people to know why it's happening, so that you don't feel it's something that I've done, because taking that away from somebody, it's for many people. And if I can just go into more detail, I mean, fibroids, many women live with fibroids and don't even know that they have them. They're so common that if you sort of looked in terms of global occurrence, you could say out of 100 women, 66 or 67 globally, so not picking at anybody's race or ethnicity, 66 to 67 might have fibroids. Now, if you take those people who definitely have fibroids, whether they knew about it or they didn't, if you take 100 of that group of women and sort of sat them in the room and say, let's have a conversation and talk about your symptoms, the majority of them actually are fine. They don't have any symptoms. And those are the group that either they've got very tiny fibroids, they go on to have pregnancy, they don't have any symptoms, doesn't bother them. But you do have a nice chunk. And when I say nice, it's not in a nice way, it's a significant number of about 30, 33 of that in that room who will have symptoms that can range from different things. It's either causing pain, or it's causing trouble with bleeding, um, is causing trouble like constipation, back pain, and it can create problems with fertility. So, either in terms of trying to get pregnant, for a baby to implant, or because the fibroid is sitting in place, it might, in some circumstances, be related to having a miscarriage, or just make it difficult.
Mm.
So to different extent. But I really want to, I like balance, and I want to make sure that there is a balance. So yes, it is a significant condition. There are many women who have it and don't have symptoms, but there are those who have it with very significant symptoms. And of course, they're the ones that we sort of focus on, because we want everyone to sort of have quality health and a great quality of life. So I think, in a sort of a nutshell, I think I've tried to cover as much as I can about sort of what fibroids are, and how we've sort of ended up with them, and some the challenge is that we still have many questions to answer about fibroids, more than we know already.
What is so if you have really bad period cramps, is that a sign of fibroids?
It's a sign of many different conditions.
Oh, okay.
Really heavy periods is a symptom of, or a suggestion that something is not right. And I'm so glad you said that, because somehow we sort of managed to condition ourselves and say, oh, it's one of those things to live with. Um, Sorry to
Mm.
digress, but not too long ago, because I was so caught up by her story. I didn't know her until after she'd passed. But there was this model, I think she was quite popular on Instagram, called Jessica Petway. And I think what she had was, I can't remember which cancer she had, but the story was just horrendous. And one of the things that struck me when I was looking into it and preparing to talk about it on my channel was how that she was having horrendous bleeding, really bad bleeding, not just bleeding that was soaking sheets, but proper large clots, which are sort of like flesh like. which
Ooh.
which which tells us that there's heavy bleeding going on quite quickly. So small amounts, maybe smaller than a 5p coin, small one or two here or there, maybe the first couple of days of the period, for somebody might be okay, heavy bleeding. But she was having horrendous amounts of bleeding. Bleeding can be
Mhm.
different for all of us, can be different. And again, it's something that a woman would sit down with her doctor, go through what exactly is happening when you have your periods. How many tampons or pads are you using? How heavy are they? Are you flooding clothes sheets, bed sheets? Are you passing clothes? Questions that you must ask before you can determine how much. And the experience is different for different women, so we can't assume. But anyway, back to the lady. She was having this experience, and what caught me was that she said she spoke to her circle of friends, and it seemed that people said, "Oh, it's one of these things." And I don't know the context. I don't know the context, and I'm not judging, but I think it's important to be able to say it's not normal. It's not normal. It could indicate so many different things. Fibroids is just one. We haven't talked about endometriosis. We haven't talked about PCOS. We haven't talked about other conditions. Even a sexually transmitted infection can cause heavy periods. So you can't assume. It just simply means that something is not right. You need to sit down and have a conversation. And then the process, once that conversation is ongoing, questions and answers about the nature of the periods and any other symptoms, because perhaps there's pain, perhaps there's bloating, perhaps there's different things that can help us as we go on to examine and then perhaps have a scan before you can say, right, it's fibroid. So that having periods is a mark. Heavy and painful periods, they're irregular, they're very long, maybe lasting for 10, 12 days, bleeding, very painful. They're a sign that something's not right. We have to find out what's going on.
Yeah, and so I was saying right because I actually had a friend. She caught an STD in Brazil, and I'm telling y'all right now, y'all need to use protection in Brazil because they don't. I'm telling y'all right now. That's one of the countries. Don't mess
Oh
around.
dear.
Do not mess around. Anyway, so but she came back with STD and she talked exactly what you said. Her bleeding was crazy. She was like, it's insane. And I was like, yeah, because your reproductive organ is not healthy. Like it's telling you, it's communicating to you, right? And I think that's the biggest thing about our I think it's a blessing. Yeah, it's a blessing if you know how to handle it. But it's nice because our like monthly time is our body's way of telling us, hey, everything's good to go. We good. You're eating right. You're living right. Or you gotta fix this. We gotta stop eating this. There's something you ate last week. This is not okay. So it's our way of our. It's like our own little mini doctor. I'll put that in quotes. I'll put that in quotes, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's good to listen. Of course, you've got to listen to your body. I understand what you mean. Absolutely.
Yeah. Not, obviously doesn't have a PhD, right? But it's one of those like maybe not doctor's right word, but it's one of those ways we can gauge our body health. Where I feel like men maybe they have their own version of this. I don't really know, but at least for women, every month we get a little check in with our bodies. But this is something that wasn't taught to us when we learned about reproductive health. This isn't the way that they taught reproductive health in schools, at least, right? And so a lot of us are
Hmm.
miseducated about, what our periods really are and like kind of the blessing that it brings us. Because at the end of the day, we're built to carry another life. So, our reproductive organs can really tell us if our bodies are actually prepared to carry a life or not. Okay. Um,
Hmm.
and we
Hmm.
get this check-in again. It's a free check-in every month, so you know so it's really important to be like in tune with your reproductive health. Real quick, so I just wanted to go, we're gonna, yeah, since we're on the topic and it's all women here, we're gonna talk about it. So we know that when we have our periods, it's kind of the uterine, and you can again correct me if I'm wrong, the uterine lining is shedding itself. What
Hmm.
exactly is it shedding? What's going on? Is it like when our skin is like dead skin and it's just, I don't think it's just that because there's a lot more coming, it's not just dead skin. But can you just kind of tap into
Yeah.
that situation that we get every month, and how that relates to reproductive health?
Yes, sure. So, for every woman in that reproductive or childbearing stage, once you hit, puberty and you start having your cycle, what's going on? So your body, um, and I'll just try and, so it's not too long, and so that we can sort of understand, and it's fairly straightforward. As we come to that point, your body, under the influence of hormones, will you will instruct your ovaries, to produce or to release an egg. We're already born with all the eggs that we have, but thanks to the messaging that is designed by our bodies, and so that is orchestrated with the hormones, at that
Mm-hmm.
particular time, an egg is released. And so the egg travels, as it comes out of the ovary, comes into the fallopian tube, and it travels very, very slowly down into the womb. And it's going to come into the womb, and that inner lining, that thin inner lining, is where it comes to. So, as the egg is making its journey, the body is also doing other things. The body is saying to itself, oh, something might happen. That egg might get fertilized. And so it's preparing other parts of the body. And so we could go into a lot of different discussion about how women feel around the time they ovulate, the changes that we see in our bodies around that time. But it's your body. Your body is like such a fantastic machine, the way it does this when things are working right, that is the way it does this. So as while the egg is doing its bit, the lining of the womb itself is getting ready to receive the egg in a special way, and its expectation is that, oh, there might be a fertilization, which is when a sperm meets the egg and they come together. That is fertilization. So if fertilization happens, that leads to, a baby. Let's use that term. It's fetus. Excuse me. um, the next thing is that egg that's been fertilized should now implant into that lining. But when that doesn't happen, the egg itself will, what's the best way to describe it? The word that quickly came to my head is degenerate. Basically, it dies. And because it's not being used, the purpose for the egg being released was to meet a sperm and fertilize, and then that fertilized egg is implanted into the womb and it begins to grow into a baby. That whole thing doesn't happen. So first the egg dies, and somehow the body is going to get rid of that egg. But the other thing that happens, that all that preparation that the womb was doing, preparing itself ready for a fertilized egg, and by that I mean it was getting a little bit thicker. That lining was getting a bit thicker, a bit stronger to support the egg, getting a few more blood vessels in place because it's thinking, oh, I might have a baby coming along and I need to support it. All that preparation is what is the menstrual product. That's basically what is going to come away. So if we start from that point, when the first day of your menses or first day of your period, that blood coming away is a combination of the egg that wasn't fertilized plus all that tissue, all those blood vessels getting ready for the womb to support a possible pregnancy. So that's what's coming away. That's what's shedding away from for an average cycle, an average 28-day cycle. That's what's coming away over one, day two, day three, day four-ish, day five, and it sort of empties itself. And then things sort of settle down a little bit, hormones sort of settle down a little bit, but they start going up again because another egg. So that was the shedding from the last month. Now, after day five or so, all the menstrual blood has gone. The body starts off the same process, starts off again. Another egg is released and starts traveling its way down. It's traveling its way down. The hormone levels are changing to get to the point where that egg is released. The womb is preparing itself again, and when it doesn't, sex doesn't happen, when there is no fertilization and the egg again dies, the womb lining that had been preparing, we've now come to the end of another month, another cycle, and that's shed. So that's sort of a snapshot of what's happening. Is from one cycle to the next is exactly the same journey from one ovary or the other, month after month, that women experience. And again, it's something that works, like when it does work fantastically, works like goes like clockwork. Um, and still so many complex parts of it that we don't understand, but at least as much as we can follow, as much as we can understand, I think it's just amazing the way, the body is configured. So I think, yeah, I think that's really generally what happens as you go from menstruation, why it happens, and what exactly you're shedding is simply the result of the egg that wasn't fertilized, the little tissue that the body was using to prepare the womb just in case a pregnancy happened. All that is the body's natural way of cleaning out and sorting things out and then getting straight back into business after that's done.
Mhm. Okay, okay, okay. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's important to have that, basic knowledge. I know some of y'all, maybe this was refreshing for some, maybe it's news for
Hmm.
some people, because we had, health ed, who knows how many years ago, right? Um, and yeah, and it was definitely one of those classes where you were on your phone. That's that was it was definitely one of those easy A's. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Because it's really important to understand how our body works in order to, really understand how to heal it or just take care of it, right? So when it comes to, womb health, what are the top three things or mistakes that you see a lot of women make when it comes to womb health?
Yeah. I was going to start, I was just going to start by saying, I mean, there is none of us that intentionally goes to do something clearly. But you're right, of course, there are certain habits that we might fall into that don't support the health of our wombs. But, let's also remember that for a lot of these conditions, it's something that comes into play, something that happens, and you may not be able to do anything about it. I think I'm not sure which point to put it. I think awareness and just learning, getting information, especially as you get into your late teens and 20s, and just somehow keying into a source of information. I think it's really important. I We're coming up to menstrual, not menstrual, menopause awareness. I think it's October. I think it's next month. We're coming up to that period where we'll be talking a lot. I hope to be doing a lot of talk about menopause. And sometimes when it comes up in conversation, it's as if it's only for those over 40, those in that category. But actually, there are many women who are going through what's called perimenopause. And it can start so fairly early, and it might start for some in their 30s, and they not realize it. And I don't want to blame every problem. I don't want to blame every problem for perimenopause. No, but I do think it's important that there's an awareness of the possibility that it can start a little bit earlier. And even as you get into your 40s, when I would expect that perimenopause might begin, symptoms might begin to set in before people actually get into menopause. But I digress. I'm talking about one of the things I think is really important, which is just health information, health education, health awareness. It may be that you're subscribing to a newsletter, or you're keying into a channel like mine and just getting that information. That's a shameless plug there, but I'll let it go. But I think, sort of looking at what we do, what we choose to do, of course, will be lifestyle choices. So, one of the first ones we'll talk about will be diet. Now, how much does it actually have directly on the womb? That's the question that we haven't yet answered. But it is clear that making healthy food or diet choices, including eating in moderation, choosing not to go with excess sugar or processed foods, they can definitely have an impact on overall health and reduce the risk of um, oxygen free radicals, reduce the risk of chronic inflammation and oxidative stress. All that basically suggests that tissues are dying. So when we're talking about chronic stress and inflammation, we're talking about tissues dying, tissues growing abnormally, tissues not doing what they're supposed to do. And there could be some link that we found between poor eating habits, making poor food choices, and overall health. And that will impact on the womb to some extent. Of course, there's also the choice to exercise. And I'm not suggesting that you must work out intensely or anything like that. I think that it is, again, it's in moderation. It is what is comfortable with your lifestyle, what you're happy doing, what you feel you can keep to and commit to do consistently is what will make a difference. I think there are other things, and you've touched on that. We're talking about, be safe and, sexual health. That's a choice. You can choose, okay, you're going to abstain, which might be a strange word in this generation, and which, to be fair, maybe that's actually not a fair statement because it isn't. There's some people who think, well, they want to not engage in sex just for the sake of engaging with sex. They think it's something special about it, and so on. But the fact is that if you choose to be careful about who you're sleeping with, And being careful not just doesn't just include who you're choosing, but also protecting yourself, because sadly, despite the fact that we know of all these sexually transmitted diseases, we're still struggling to control them. And this is not just in the UK, the US, different parts all around the world. We're still struggling um, with controlling these conditions. And yes, while there is HIV prophylaxis, while we have um, better treatments to control HIV than we had decades ago, why get it in the first place if you can avoid it? Is one way of looking at it. So
Right.
if possible, if somebody has it, then yes, of course they should have access to the best treatment. But maybe the step before that, maybe it's possible. And I know that's sort of like maybe a little kettle of worms, but just so that people have that consciousness of being careful, we are still talking about chlamydia, that's a sexually transmitted infection. We're still talking about gonorrhea, still dealing with fallouts from that, not just in terms of making people unwell, but the possible impacts um, conditions or diseases like that could have on future fertility. Because somebody who gets an infection like say chlamydia, for example, sometimes there may not be symptoms. And for me, I think that's one of the scariest things. Is you meet up with somebody, they look fine, every top to toe, in and out, and they might have this condition and not know, and then they've passed it on to you. Um, and you may not know anything about it, or then you may develop symptoms or something, but some people don't. But the dangerous thing about it is how it could go travel within the reproductive tract or the reproductive organs to then affect things like the tubes, affect things, the womb lining, cause infections that could have an effect on fertility. So those are some things. Those are some. You asked for three. I think I've sort of talked about four or five. I'm not sure, but those are some things that you can look at. I think education is really important, and getting the right source of education. I think looking after yourself, your overall health. I think that's really important. I think your practices, the choices that you make, in terms of sexual health, I think that's also important. And some of the things that women can do to help to keep their womb healthy. Other things like menstrual health and menstrual hygiene, those are also really important because general apart from the general wellness, but also the possibility of, conditions like, yeah, thrush, or yes, they can treat them easily, but then they can also be quite uncomfortable, and you don't really need to, have them if you shouldn't. So just a little bit of a look into some of the things that you could do while you're on that journey of just maintaining your overall health and your womb health.
Okay, and I have two questions. This is kind of from the audience. Can you still get STDs without penetration?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
okay,
Okay, go on.
okay. And can you get pregnant without penetration? That's the other question. You're
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I get that a lot. So I think this is referring to people who practice the withdrawal method and, or no, not withdrawal method. Sorry, no, not that. I think this is people who um maybe they're just touching and their partner ejaculates on the thigh. That's the one, because I've had this question before. Yeah, on the thigh, and so it doesn't. So theoretically, because what you need is for the sperm to be deposited within the vaginal canal, and then they swim in the semen, and they swim up towards the tube, because that's really the most common site where fertilization happens, where the sperm and the egg meet. Actually happens all the way in the tube, so the sperm really have to travel. But boy, if you've ever looked at them, a sample of semen under a microscope, they can swim. so so
okay,
theoretically, um,
okay,
somebody landing semen on your thigh, even if it's as close to the vagina, I mean, it would really have to be that the sperm is really introduced into the vagina, and then
okay, okay, okay,
and then
okay,
they can
okay.
swim.
No,
But
I
so
know.
theoretically, no. But again, and that's one of, I think, the opportunity to sort of have a conversation and hopefully help people make make decisions before it gets to that point. Because if you're asking that question, it tells me that you're concerned that you're not ready for the consequences of this. And so what can you do? That's part of the, hey, do you know what? Before you get into that sort of sticky situation where you're now going to be, really worried, really, really anxious, really for the next 2 or 3 or how many weeks before your period comes, you are in just shattered, really. And I don't joke with that, because I get quite a few comments from people worried about, oh, this has happened, am I going to get pregnant? And we're trying to guess or estimate, which we can't, to be honest with you. You're just going to have to wait for your period to come and do a pregnancy test. But it does cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. And I think before we get to that point, there should be a conversation about what is it that I want. And if I'm not ready for this, then maybe not do it, or find a way to protect myself so that I don't have to suffer all that psychological stress because of this act. So sorry, I've gone into a tangent, but I thought it was good to chip that in.
No, it's important, and I love like what you said. It's like I think more women need to take a time. I mean, well, not even women.
Everybody.
Everybody needs to take more time to reflect. Period. Right? It's not even just. It's not a woman thing. Everybody does. But I think especially when it comes to our reproductive health, our reproductive organs, um, it's just super important to have that conversation with ourselves and really sit with ourselves, and maybe even like somehow create a barrier between the time you're about to
Hmm.
sleep with somebody, and maybe lock put yourself in the bathroom and just be like, okay, here are the consequences. How can I stop these consequences from happening? But it's hard because it's hard in the moment, right? So it's like one of those things.
But it is, it's as you say, it is one of those things that you should. And it's there's no, we all have different experiences. There's no easy one way. There is, uh, you can try and say it at different stages in people's different circumstances at school, or whether they've come out of school or university or whichever, so that people are armed with the information. And there's lots of wonderful public health messaging in different countries. And I think we just need to continue to do what we can and share that, these conditions, for example, STIs or STDs, they haven't gone away. And they can have serious consequences. Thankfully, we're getting better at treating, and there's lots of awareness, with people having mobile phones and being able to get messages and all that. So many amazing things that can be done. But yeah, just that time to sort of think about, this has consequences, and what can I tolerate, what can I deal with, what do I not want to deal with? And then on it goes.
This farm isn't just any farm. It grows for Juice Plus. Juice Plus is farm to capsule nutrition made from 30 different non-GMO fruits, vegetables, and berries. Harvested at peak goodness to make nutrient-rich plant powders in convenient capsules. Clinically proven for over 20 years to support your wellness. And makes it easy to help bridge the gap between what you should eat and do eat. Fruits and vegetables are always on the table with Juice Plus. Juice Plus. Goodness is our natural state.
Right. Yeah, I like that. What do I not want to deal with? That's the question we should all be asking
Yeah.
ourselves. What do I not want to deal with?
Hmm.
You're right. It does. It causes so much
Yeah.
stress on top of everything.
Hmm.
It costs money
Yeah.
too. Like it all adds up. It all adds up, and it only takes little moments. Just
Yeah.
really reflect
That's true.
and ask yourself, is it worth it? Um. Okay. Cool. So, are there any natural remedies for STDs that you know of? Because we all know you can take pills. You go to your doctor, but is there any holistic practices?
I am, well, the way I answer that question is because I know that we don't have enough information about so many different things. And modern medicine can be very prescriptive, in terms of do this and do that. And usually because I'm a child of modern medicine, I was trained in medical school and all that. And usually it's based on what information we have from available studies. I'm not a naturopath, I'm not a traditional healer, but I do know that before we got into modern medicine, there were so many things going on years and years and years ago that people did. And that's what I mean that by we need so many more studies to be able to identify that perhaps there are things that occur naturally. And a lot of the medicine that we use, they're not all just designed in laboratories. There's some that have their very basis in plants, in herbs. So I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to try and guess at anything and try and mislead anybody. So no, I don't know. I If someone came to me and we've done the test and we've worked out that they have chlamydia or gonorrhea, whichever one, then I would sort of go to what is the modern medical treatment that we have to deal with the condition. But before this, what I would say that we should remember that before these treatments or these drugs that we have today came into place, there was a lot, we had serious outbreaks of these conditions. We had a lot, very, very high incidences of these conditions. They were not controlled. And this was not just impacting individuals, even children could be affected. So I would be very, very careful because there isn't any evidence to suggest that taking something naturally to deal with very serious conditions like sexually transmitted diseases works. And I would be very, very careful. Um, there, that said, there's something like like genital warts, for example. I think that's actually a good example that you could find. Some people might not want to use any of the paints or the creams or the things that we would prescribe in modern medicine. The thing about genital warts is actually if you leave them alone, after some time they will actually disappear, but that takes a long, 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 long time and can be uncomfortable, just distressing and so on. But there's some things like I think just off the top of my head, tea tree ointments. I might be wrong. I'll need to check that, but that is something that's based from a natural source, from a plant source, and I think it actually comes in. It comes in different types of creams or preparations that can be used. How effective? Perhaps that's another conversation to have because it may not be as effective as others. But when it comes to sexual infections that can cause serious complications, impact fertility, I'm not aware of any sort of natural measures to go about treating them. And usually I would like people to have a very good conversation with their doctor, modern medical practitioner, know the pros and cons. Even if you wanted to sort of go into natural, still speak to your practitioner and have an idea of the pros and cons. Nobody's trying to force you or make decisions for you. Your choice is respected, but I think it should be a choice that's informed. You've got all the information and you're choosing what you want to do, but you know the pros and cons for each situation.
Okay. Yeah, so just be educated about what you end up using, That's
Hmm.
the important part. Um, what are like some of the biggest misconceptions that you see women have about womb health?
I think so let me talk about sort of the 20s to 30s. Let's leave teens alone because teenagers. I love teens. My daughter just turned into a teen, so I think it's an amazing time of life. I think in 20s to 30s, we just assume, and speaking generally, of course, because there are different people that have different conditions. I'm being very general here. There's that assumption that everything's fine. Your body just does what it does. It just, you just, enjoy life as you should. Do your work, business, whatever it is, and just assume and not pay particular attention to what is going on. But hopefully, with the support of family, friends, information that you gather, you're practicing the right things, you're using the right sanitary products, you're, doing the right things in terms of diet and exercise, and that's fine. Um, and then coming to 30s to 40s, and one of them, like I just mentioned, and I think it's interesting that you asked this question, one of them is that assumption that things are just going to carry on fine and there wouldn't be a stage where, oh, my body doesn't function as well as it does. Because that time will come. It is for women, we will get to a point where we're no longer ovulating, we're no longer producing those hormones. That stage will come. Now, not every woman with menopause has distressing menopause symptoms. If you remember what we said about fibroids, not everybody who has fibroids um actually knows that they don't have any symptoms. They don't even know about it. And menopause can take that path. I know somebody, I was trying to talk to her about a menopause survey. I was trying to gather information. What is your experience with menopause? We're having conversations. Let's talk about it. I don't have any symptoms. And she's well past menopausal age. So it is the fact is that it is a transition. It's a physiologic transition. It is the way that you enter puberty. You're going to enter menopause. But some people will experience those symptoms while some don't. So again, I think it's that feeling that things will just continue, carry on, carry on just like that. Um, another misconception may be around around pregnancy. I think this is interesting because a while ago I sort of did a study on. By study, I mean I was just putting out videos around what happens during pregnancy. I didn't go through every single thing, but just a few things that sort of were interesting at that point. And many women asked the question about, I wasn't told that this was going to happen. I didn't know this was going to happen during pregnancy. Because, of course, that's another time when your body just shocks you, and not
Mhm.
just your womb, but the changes that happen, they just sort of like someone pull the carpet from under your feet and you didn't realize. Um, but I think those sort of changes are things that as a woman gets pregnant, as she advances in her pregnancy, then she would learn, and hopefully there are resources and information that would help with that. Something else I think that some women don't know about the womb. For example, I talked about the 3 layers. The structure of the womb is such that the neck of the womb, that's the lowest part that juts into the vagina, is called the cervix. The vagina itself is a tube that ends blindly, as in it's not an open tube that's sort of just gaping into the rest of your body. It's actually sort of a closed channel, and the cervix juts into it. I wish I had one of my props. That would have been so useful to demonstrate. But some people are scared that, oh, um if I have a tampon, it's going to get lost inside. Now, tampons shouldn't be forgotten. They shouldn't be, we don't want that happening. If you're wearing tampons, please, you should be changing them regularly. If, and I say this because it's very easy, because when they're in place, they can be comfortable as they should be. You're not supposed to feel them. So it can be easy to forget them. And yes, many of us have been in the situation where we've had to pull out one that's been left there for days, and we don't want that happening. But there's some people who are afraid that, oh, it might get lost in me. So that's not going to happen because, like I said, the vagina isn't a tube that is open. It's actually closed, and it's the neck of the womb, the cervix, that sort of gently button into the vagina. Um, I think something else as well that we may have misconceptions about are how our vaginas, our cervix, the womb changes with our menstrual cycle. Because I think a lot of women are aware of this, but the thing that is most obvious is the fact that, oh, bleeding 3, 4, 5 days in the month, and then, but a lot is going on that you can actually tell about your body's health, just as you mentioned earlier. You can look at the fluid, the cervical fluid that you might observe. Um, just a small amount of thin fluid. It shouldn't smell. It's just a natural odor is really what you should see. But you can tell the difference, and it could tell you whether, without somebody checking dates, it could say to you that, oh, you're about to ovulate or have ovulated, or different stages or different phases of the menstrual cycle. Um, so I don't know. I think there are a few things that we've got information about. We get to learn either from talking to friends, sisters, moms, and all that. We get information from. But I think they're just some of those examples at different stages of life, things that people, I think, women just ignore because it doesn't really bother us or concern us. I know that definitely when I was in my 20s, 30s, things that bothered me are different from, okay, what bothered me now. So I think it's just interesting, and I'm a medical practitioner, so I have, because this is my job, this is what I do. But just thinking, taking off the medical hat and just thinking as an individual, I know that the perception is different from, different stages of our lives. So yeah, I think those are some of the things that I'd cover in that area.
Okay. And well, so real quick, let's. So I wanted to go back to what you said about pregnancy. What were some of the shocks or surprises that women had when it came to pregnancy?
It goes from it goes from, there's so many different things. And after a while I started asking myself, in which setting would we in which setting could we tell people all about this thing, so that you can sort of have them in a, downloadable guide. This is what to expect. Maybe that's what I should do one, actually. This is what to expect when you're pregnant. And this is not poking fun at anybody, because one, we're all different. And so one person might not experience the same thing as other people. Now, some people might not expect that during their pregnancy, they would live with a nasty should I call it nasty, some kind of odd taste in their mouth. And this is just random. It doesn't happen to everybody. And it's usually around the tongue, for example, very uncomfortable taste. And at the point that they've had the baby, it settles. It's simply because of the effect of the hormones. Some people didn't expect that when they, we talk about common things like, oh, cravings and, things that one would expect. But some people might not realize that, okay, when you get pregnant, your bowels become more sluggish, they sort of slow down. And this is the effect of the pregnancy hormones as well. And so you might have issues with constipation and heartburn. Some people don't realize it may have an effect on the skin, not just the hair, because I think we're familiar with the skin, with the hair and, glowing hair or thin hair, but skin and maybe increased pigmentation, especially for us, people of color, black people, that you might get quite dark. For some women, it reverses. For some it doesn't. Um, what are the other things that came up in that conversation? Um, what after having the baby, some people might have a cut down in the around the vulva, just to help to ease the baby. So a little cut is given as the baby's head is coming through, and maybe that conversation wasn't had about. Of course, it will heal with the right care. It will heal. Your body will heal. But some people may not be expecting that and what to do with that, and sort of situations around around that kind of circumstance. Mood, what could happen with your mood? I think that's a conversation that we should have. Thankfully, many people do have a support, but I had somebody respond to what video? I think it was a video on C-section, and I think she had mentioned, take advantage of any support that you have, and she quoted that suggestion of mine and said, that's all very well if you have the support. I was like, oh my god. And I thought that is so true. Not everybody has the support. Many people are so fortunate. We've got family, moms, dads, partners, and everyone around. People loving, wanting to grab hold of the baby. You don't even get a chance to hold your own baby in some situations, but not everybody has that. And what about the mental health toll? Um, because these hormones, as they fluctuate between the time that we're not pregnant and become pregnant and then not pregnant again, the hormones are fluctuating. Sometimes women might have baby blues that are for a couple of days, maybe a bit emotional, a bit weepy, and that settle. But some women could go on to have proper, more established, more intense, severe symptoms that indicate postpartum depression or psychosis. And some people, that wasn't in the cards, that wasn't expected. And this is something that in some cultures is still something that we hide. I'm Nigerian by origin, and being able to speak about mood, and something that's not right, family would want, people want to hide it and not talk about it because it's weird. And thankfully we're coming away from that. But again, it's one of those things that you think, oh, had a baby, you should be happy. Oh, it's a wonderful time. It is. But sometimes there may be some people who experience some stress or some complications and just need some support, because actually you can recover from something like postpartum depression, with treatment. Some people, it might just be therapy, but there is the support that is, an understanding that's needed, at those just very, those important periods of the transition.
Yeah, and I like that you talked about, yeah, postpartum depression. It's like it just comes from, a culture or programming of not being able to express our emotions, right? And we live in
Mm,
such an interesting time, because I think a lot of us are coming back into kind of a culture of expressing our emotions, or having a space, and that's what I'm saying, a space to express our emotions, whether it's with a friend or with a therapist. And when I say friend, I mean a friend who is, open minded and isn't going to
yes.
judge you, which can be
Mm-hmm.
hard, because sometimes we think that, we can talk to friends or family members who haven't judged us in the past, but then when it comes to this one thing, they don't really
Mm,
quite get it.
yeah,
So that's
that's
why
true.
I really, always advocate for people to see therapists, because it's like you need to have somebody who will just provide that safe space for you to really express what you're going through, right? Um, so thank you for touching on that too, because like I said, like a lot of women, yeah, they don't really talk about that aspect. That is a possibility, right? It's not a guarantee. not doesn't happen to everybody, but it is a possibility that I think a lot of women
I think many women will come out of pregnancy, and because you have your 9 months to sort of prepare and get all the information, especially in this age, ask the questions, do all the research, and then I can't think of anyone, unless maybe somebody who's had been pregnant before a couple of times, you would come out and, oh, new experience. Isn't that just interesting, something new about your body? But yeah, I think it's an area that I think it's interesting, and we're all different. Information also helps, I would say.
where do you see yourself expanding from here?
It's been an amazing journey. I think I started thinking about this and doing something about this in 2016 or 2018. I think either of those 2 years I set up the website. I mean, coming from a medical background, didn't have any idea about tech, and I thought, oh wow, I can do this. My hunger was just to put information out there in such a way that if anyone else who's reading it and it's not medical, it resonates and it explains and it provides information. So I had fun tinkering around the website for some time, and then it evolved, and then somebody said to me, but you do well on YouTube. You explain things. Why don't you go on YouTube? Because I would never imagine putting myself out there on YouTube until they suggested. And I think one of the things that's really amazing is the feedback, and just the fact that somebody says, thank you so much for sharing this. I didn't understand it that way. And I don't think it's not because I'm the only good doctor. No, yes, I've chosen to sort of put this out there because I'm interested in doing that. I'm sure there are lots of other practitioners like myself, but sometimes you meet people and there is a connection, and it works, it gels. I think is the way. I can't find the proper word, but it makes sense. There's a resonance, and it's good. You feel comfortable and happy and safe speaking to this person. So I've really been so fulfilled and so grateful for the kind of growth that we've had in terms of the information sharing and how the platform's growing. Um, I started because, like I said, I was in my practice and getting all these questions and pulling my hair out because there wasn't enough time. And I've advanced as a practitioner. I'm a fellow of the Royal College of General Practitioners, which is the recognition that the college awards to GPs who sort of reached the pinnacle of the profession. And when I was awarded that fellowship, I was so thrilled because I thought, wow, this is amazing. And it's for me, it was like a door opening, and it encouraged me to say, let's expand on what we're doing. Let's see if we can get more women of color having this conversation, Black women, Asian women, other ethnicities. And it's not just really, I really, on my website, I don't say, oh, I won't talk to anybody unless you're a person of color. No, it's not that. It's just that, well, the information that speaks directly to somebody that looks like me is not as much as I would like it to be. And so I think it's right to be able to say, hey, let's create that information. So there's a nice balance. And when I click on, somewhere, and I'm looking for information, and I'm hearing, looking at you talking about it, it's like, yeah, I think she understands. I think, what she's saying. And not because any other person is saying it wrong, but because, it's coming from someone that you think, hey, I can relate to that. So to cut this winding tale I'm telling short, I'm hoping that we can expand the work that we're doing into different platforms. I'm hoping that I can partner with people so that we can provide care by way of information to women, different parts, in whichever part of the world you are, really. Um, and I always stress that I don't give you health advice per se, because I can't be everyone's clinician. And that's the same for any other clinician on YouTube or any other social media. We can't make that diagnosis. We can't tell you to do this, that, or the other. But what we can do is say, hey, listen, we are providing this information based on the training that we've had, and we are subject to regular reviews and appraisals. And we use this information the same way that I would say to somebody sitting in front of me in my practice, is the same way I'm providing this information. And for that person who I'm licensed to provide care to, I'm regulated. We have our General Medical Council in the UK that regulates doctors. So I'm regulated, and I have to be careful that what I'm providing is evidence based information. And it's that same attitude that I bring to my platforms or my channel. So it's being able to help people with direction and guidance and say, hey, check this out. This something might not be right here. And then the person goes to sit with their own practitioner and hopefully gets things looked into, get things sorted out. It's providing a safe space. So I want to continue doing more of that. I want to see more people come and join our community on the website, askgatewayhealth.org, on the YouTube platform and other social media, and just derive support and some way forward, next step in the right direction. I think that's what would really make me happy to see that we're doing in the next 5-10 years.
Oh, I love that. I love to hear it. Yes, 'cause we just need more of that. Especially, I love that you touched on having providing information for people in other parts of the world who can't have access to the best doctors, or don't have aren't even near a hospital, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, so I really love that, because this is part of the reason why I made this podcast too, is to really start to remind people we are being more and more globalized every single year. And it's really important to start thinking of, your business or your aspirations in that global scale, to really start to understand and understand that, when we post online, we don't know who we could impact positively. We don't know, who's going to watch our videos. But putting that information out there, no matter how many views you get, it could really change lives, And so I just really appreciate all of the work that you do. And like I said, I love your YouTube channel, and I just love that it's Ask Away Health, so you really have that strong connection with your audience that, like I said, I haven't really seen with other YouTubers. So thank you so much for being on the show. And so Dr. Sylvia has 2 freebies for you guys. The link is in the description below. Do you want to talk about that briefly, or? Okay, go ahead.
I also want to say thank you so much. I've looked on your channel, and I think reaching out to people that the way you do, because your personality is just so sort of bubbly, loving, and so open, and well done, because we need more of this kind of um helping to provide safety, not judgment, helping to direct people, position people, just being a friend. So well done, for the amazing thing that you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
So my freebies, one of the other things I do in my spare time, so I when I have these bits of information, I think, how can I get somebody to just sort of, it's there in their pocket. So sometimes I just put a bit of information, I put it into a guide. So this, I think the ones that I've linked here are the ones for, is it fibroids, foods for fibroids? Because I've got quite a few. So I've got quite a few, and that I've created. But I think these are for foods for fibroids, and it's just a quick graphic that just sort of shows you, similar to what we're just saying here. What types of food, and is mainly really in terms of natural. If you're going natural, then you're probably likely to be fine. The thing about things like red meat and even fish, according to some studies, I know this might take us far, and I don't want to do that. Sometimes they might be the cattle that the red meat comes from, maybe ingesting food that's been treated with pesticides, and so you have this endocrine
Yeah.
that we were talking about earlier, and so that way could leach into the beef. There may be that role, or there could also be the role of the red meat contributing to inflammation. By the time you go into this, you just think, oh my goodness, where does it end? But anyway, so that's so that guide just sort of helps you look at the types of foods that, if and I also want to say, I say this with very respect for people who are not really keen on modern medicine. um my colleagues, an obstetrician I was speaking to, sorry, gynecologist that I was speaking to about fibroids, and everybody in modern medicine, we're talking about holistic care. There's nobody who would want to just sort of put you on the table and say, oh, let's just whip out the fibroids or whip out the womb. That's not the first point of call, and I don't agree with clinicians who do that. I think you should look at the woman holistically, and help her to maximize her diet, help her to maximize what's going on with her weight, provide that support, at least from your end. You can't make her do it, but you can provide her the support. And it can be that with that healthy eating, that could help in terms of some of the symptoms. It's not going to get rid of the fibroid altogether, but perhaps it could help a little bit. Some help with medication. Maybe some people might use surgery alternatives. It's a holistic thing. It's combining the different options in addition to what you as the person prefer, what you want to have. It's that whole conversation. So anyway, that's what that guide is. I think the other one is about, is it vaginal dryness? I can't remember. Yeah, and so you can have a look at them, and I think they link onto the other ones, and then there's information that you can sort of get at from the site.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all that information. Yeah, and yeah, we can get back into it, but we're not going to.
I
But yeah,
know.
just what you said about the quality of the meat, right? The quality of the food that you're eating. This is the key. This is the key. Okay. Yes, you can have red meat, but you gotta.
It's a whole conversation.
Yeah, right. Maybe I should have you and Lisa on at the same time podcast. 'Cause she talked about this too in that podcast that we had about fertility health. So it'll be cool if we can get both of you guys.
There's a lot of studies. I think many women, and I think rightly so, ask questions. Why don't we know more and more about these things? And I think that's a great question. But there are some studies. There are studies going on. There are papers I've been looking at recently talking about impact of food and fibroids. And the problem sometimes is that the information is conflicting, or when they've done the studies it's not been exactly the same way as the other one. So some people might do a study and they say, oh, a group of people ate red meat and it didn't have any effect on their fibroids, and then another study will say, oh, a group of people ate red meat and oh, they had issues. So you have conflicting, which is where the science is at the moment. But at least the questions are being asked, they're doing the studies. We need more so that people can
Yeah.
get the right information. We can work out why does this happen, and not just fibroids, other health conditions. I think I'll just shut up now so that at least you can round up your. Thank you so much.
No, it's all good. I love it. I have to have you back on at some point. I
I'd
know
love
your
to.
schedule
I'd
is
love to. Thank you.
busy, but definitely next year I'll have to have you back on
Yes,
to talk about more of this
absolutely.
stuff.
Absolutely.
Especially with women's health, because it's so important to get that knowledge out there. It is so important. Okay, so everybody, you guys can reach
Extra.
Dr. Sylvia at
Yep.
Askaway Health on X,
Mhm.
right? I was like X, Twitter, X, okay, Instagram, Facebook,
Mhm.
all of it, okay, and you look
Yes,
for
correct.
LinkedIn if you want to get in touch with her. Just search Sylvia, Kama-Kieghe. So thank you so much for being on the show, and as usual, you guys, I will see y'all next week. I love y'all so much.